The massive holographic screen in the center of the Galactic Council chamber suddenly lit up with flashing red warnings. Ambassador Tejo from Earth was reviewing routine diplomatic reports when the emergency signal cut through all other communications. The sound was terrible, filled with static, fear, and desperation. "This is Colony Administrator Velton of the Zephyrian settlement on Kepler 44 to be." The voice came through broken and panicked. "We are under attack by the Varactor horde. Our defensive systems have failed. They are consuming everything. Our crops, our forests, our very soil. Please, if anyone in the galaxy can hear this message, we desperately need help. They're eating our world alive, and we have nowhere left to run." The transmission cut to static, then silence. The enormous chamber, which usually buzzed with constant conversation between hundreds of different alien species, fell completely quiet. You could hear the soft hum of the translation devices and the nervous breathing of council members from dozens of worlds. Tejo felt his stomach drop. He had visited Kepler 44 to be just 2 months ago during his diplomatic tour. The Zephyrians were gentle, plant-like beings who had created one of the most beautiful agricultural worlds in the galaxy. Their floating gardens and crystal cities were works of art. They had no weapons, no military, no way to defend themselves against any serious threat. The council speaker, a tall being with 4 arms and silver skin, stood up slowly. "The horde," he said, his voice heavy with dread. "We haven't seen them in this sector for over 50 years. Worried murmurs spread through the chamber like wildfire. The Varactor were legendary throughout the galaxy, not for their heroism, but for their unstoppable hunger. They were a species that had evolved to consume entire worlds. They traveled in massive living ships that could eat through planetary crusts and atmosphere. When they found a world rich in life, they would strip it completely bare, leaving nothing but dead rock floating in space." "How many ships do they have?" asked the representative from the Centauri Federation, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. "Our long-range sensors detect at least 200 bioships in the Kepler system," replied the military advisor. "They've been feeding for approximately 72 hours. The chamber erupted in panicked discussions. 200 Varactor bioships was more than most species had ever seen in one place. Each bioship was the size of a small moon and contained millions of the creatures. "What military forces do we have available?" asked the council speaker, though his tone suggested he already knew. The answer wouldn't be good. The silence that followed was more telling than any words. Representatives looked at each other nervously. The Altarians had a decent fleet, but they were currently dealing with civil war on their homeworld. The Centaurians had excellent defensive capabilities, but their ships were designed for protection, not attack. The crystalline beings from Rigel had powerful weapons, but moved too slowly to be effective against the fast-moving Varactor swarms. "The truth is," said the military advisor quietly, "most civilizations in the galaxy simply evacuate when the Varactor appear. Direct combat with them is considered suicide. Their bioships can regenerate damage faster than conventional weapons, can inflict it. Their swarm tactics overwhelm even our best defensive systems." The hopelessness in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Here was an entire world of innocent beings crying for help, and the mighty Galactic Council, representing thousands of worlds and trillions of citizens, was powerless to save them. The heavy silence in the Galactic Council chamber stretched on for what felt like forever. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in their seats, staring at the floor or at each other, but nobody was volunteering to help the dying Zephyrian colony. The weight of helplessness pressed down on everyone present. Then, from the back, a section where the newer council members sat, Ambassador Tejo slowly stood up. His simple black uniform looked plain compared to the elaborate robes and exotic appearances of the other delegates. He cleared his throat and spoke in a calm, steady voice that somehow carried across the entire massive chamber. "The humans volunteer." For a moment, nobody reacted. Then, like a wave spreading across water, laughter began to ripple through the chamber. Started as quiet chuckles from a few delegates, but quickly grew into open amusement from dozens of Species, the Altarian delegate's purple tentacles writhed and twisted in what their species considered hilarious laughter. "The newcomers?" he said between gasps. "These humans have barely achieved interstellar travel. They only joined the Council 6 months ago." A crystalline being from the Rigel system chimed in, their voice ringing like broken glass. "Their world was just classified as marginally habitable by our survey teams. What could they possibly contribute to a military operation of this scale? Marginally habitable," repeated another delegate, slapping his knee with one of his 6 hands. "Their planet doesn't even have proper climate control. Half their world is covered in frozen water." Laughter grew louder. Some delegates were pointing at Tejo. Others were sharing jokes with their neighbors about the primitive humans who thought they could take on the mighty Victor horde. But Tejo didn't sit down. He stood perfectly still, waiting for the laughter to die down. Beside him, a figure in military uniform stepped forward. This was Captain Jinwoo, the human military liaison to the Galactic Council. His face was serious, showing no embarrassment or anger at the mockery. "We'll send our 3rd Fleet," Jinwoo announced in a clear, professional voice. 500 ships, 20,000 Marines. It can be ready to deploy within 12 hours. The laughter stopped abruptly. Chamber fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of shock and disbelief. Council speakers for eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of confusion in his species. 500 ships, he repeated slowly. "You're saying your species has 500 military vessels?" "That's just our 3rd Fleet," Jinwoo replied matter-of-factly. "We have 7 fleets total, plus reserve forces." The Centaurian delegate leaned forward in her seat. 20,000 Marines? You're talking about ground forces willing to fight the Vractor face-to-face? "Yes, ma'am," Jinwoo nodded. "Our Marines are trained for hostile environment combat. They can operate in conditions that would be lethal to most species." The council speaker's multiple eyes focused on Tejo. "You're serious about this? You're actually volunteering to fight the Vractor?" The chamber was now completely silent. Every delegate was staring at the 2 humans, trying to process what they were hearing. A species that had been a galactic civilization for less than a year was volunteering to take on the most feared enemy in known space. Tejo looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who had been laughing at him just moments before. When he spoke, his voice was calm and determined. "We accept the mission." The human fleet moved through hyperspace like a school of metallic fish, their engines humming with quiet efficiency. Several alien observers had been assigned to travel with the humans to document this unprecedented mission, most expected to be writing obituaries rather than victory reports. Dr. Mayung, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, found herself constantly surrounded by curious and increasingly worried alien guests. It had started innocently enough when the Zephyrian observer noticed the environmental readings from Earth displayed on her workstation. "These numbers must be wrong," said Observer Kethel, his leaf-like skin rustling with concern. "This says your world's temperature ranges from -89 to +58 degrees Celsius." Myung looked up from her research notes and smiled. "Oh, that's just the normal range. We've recorded temperatures as low as -93 degrees in some areas." The Zephyrian's chlorophyll-based skin visibly paled, but that's impossible. No complex life could survive in such extreme conditions. "It gets pretty cold," Myung agreed casually. "But humans adapted. We developed things like fire, clothing, and shelter. Some of our people actually enjoy winter sports in those temperatures." Word of this conversation spread quickly through the alien observers. Soon Myung's small laboratory was packed with representatives from a dozen different species, all staring at Earth's environmental data with growing horror. "Hey, your atmospheric composition shows 21% oxygen," noted the Altarian delegate, his tentacles quivering. "That's a highly combustible atmosphere. One spark, and your entire world could burst into flames." "We've learned to be careful with fire," Myung replied, "though we also use it for cooking, heating, and manufacturing. It's quite useful once you understand it." The crystalline being from Rigel made a sound like breaking glass. "Your planet experiences regular seismic activity, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis. How do your people survive such catastrophic events? We build our structures to withstand earthquakes, Myung explained. And we have early warning systems for tsunamis and volcanic activity. Some of our cities are built right next to active volcanoes. By choice, gasped a Centaurian observer. The soil is very fertile near volcanoes, Myung said with a shrug. Good for growing food. The questions kept coming, each answer more shocking than the last. The aliens learned that Earth's gravity was nearly twice what most species considered comfortable. They discovered that humans regularly consumed substances that would be toxic to other species, calling them spices and claiming they added flavor, but nothing prepared them for the biological survey data. These creatures, said observer Kethel, pointing at images on Myung's screen, they're all from your world. The display showed a rotating gallery of Earth's wildlife. Great white sharks with rows of razor-sharp teeth, saltwater crocodiles that could crush bones with a single bite, polar bears that weighed 800 pounds and could run faster than most alien species could move. Oh yes, Myung nodded. These are just a few examples. We have millions of species. And humans evolved alongside these predators? Asked the Altarian, his voice barely a whisper. We competed with them, Myung corrected.
Oh.
We're the prey sometimes. We were the predator. It made us adaptable. The alien observers exchanged glances. They were beginning to understand something that chilled them to their cores. The Galactic Council had classified worlds with even one of Earth's environmental hazards as Deathworlders. Planets too dangerous for colonization. Earth had dozens of these hazards, yet humans not only survived there, they thrived. Sergeant Lee Dongmin, who had been quietly maintaining his equipment nearby, looked up from his work. Class 12 hazard rating? He asked, having overheard their conversation. That's it? Earth's actually pretty comfortable once you get used to it. His aliens stared at him in stunned silence. What they considered a death world, this human called comfortable. As the fleet continued its journey through hyperspace, word spread to every ship. The galaxy was about to witness what happened when a species forged in the fires of a death. World went to war. The moment the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace, every person on every ship fell silent. What they saw in front of them was beyond anyone's worst nightmares, Kepler-44b. Once known as the garden world of the Outer Rim, looked like a victim of cosmic torture. The planet that had been covered in lush green forests and floating crystal. Cities now showed massive brown scars across its surface. Entire continents looked like someone had taken a giant bite out of them, leaving behind raw, exposed rock and dirt. Dear ancestors, whispered the Centauri navigator, her forehands trembling. As she gripped her control station, by the void, there are hundreds of them. The Vraktor bioships were unlike anything the alien observers had ever seen, and they were absolutely terrifying. These weren't normal spacecraft built from metal and composites. These were living creatures, the size of mountains, pulsing with their own heartbeats, breathing through massive organic vents that expelled clouds of spores into space. Their hulls rippled with muscles and veins, and parts of them were constantly growing and changing shape. Some of the bioships were actively feeding on the planet's surface, extending massive tentacle-like appendages down through the atmosphere to suck up soil, water, and anything else they could consume. Others floated in orbit like sleeping giants, their bellies swollen with the planet's stolen resources. How many are there? Asked Dr. Myung, her voice barely above a whisper. Sensors are detecting 237 large bioships, reported the tactical officer, plus thousands of smaller organisms. The alien observers were paralyzed with terror. Observer Kethel's leaf-like skin had turned completely white, and he was making small whimpering sounds. The Altarian delegate's tentacles had gone completely rigid. The crystalline being from Rigel was flickering between different colors rapidly, a sign of extreme stress in their species. But the humans reacted differently. While the aliens were overwhelmed by fear, the human crew members were busy. They moved with calm efficiency, checking weapons systems, reviewing battle plans, and coordinating with other ships in the fleet. The Vraktor detected the approaching fleet almost immediately. Alarms began blaring across the massive bioships, and their surfaces started to bubble and writhe with activity. Within minutes, the real horror began. Swarms of fighter organisms launched from the bioships like angry wasps from a disturbed nest. Each fighter was the size of a small shuttle, with razor-sharp claws and teeth that could tear through metal. They moved in perfect coordination, thousands of them streaming toward the rescue fleet in waves. All ships, battle stations, Captain Jinwoo's voice came through the communications system. Calm and steady, despite the approaching nightmare. Begin evasive maneuvers. Remember your training. This was the moment the alien observers expected. To see the humans panic, surely faced with this overwhelming display of alien horror, these newcomers would break and run like every other species in the galaxy. Instead, they watched in amazement as the human ships suddenly came alive with deadly purpose. The vessels that had seemed so plain and unremarkable compared to the elegant ships of other species suddenly revealed their true nature. Weapon ports opened along their hulls, missile tubes extended, and energy weapons powered up with a hum that could be felt through the ship's structure. Phoenix Squadron, break left and engage the forward swarm, Jinwoo commanded. Eagle Squadron, take the high approach. Dragon Squadron, with me? We're going straight through the middle. The alien observers watched in shock as the human ships dove directly into the swarm of Raptor fighters, instead of the careful defensive tactics used by most galactic species. The humans attacked with aggressive maneuvers that seemed to defy common sense. Human ships spun and rolled through space, their weapons firing continuously. They used the enemy's own numbers against them, causing Raptor fighters to collide with each other as they tried to follow the unpredictable human flight patterns. "This is impossible," gasped the Centauri navigator. "They're outnumbered 50-1. But the humans weren't just surviving, they were winning. The battle had been raging for 2 hours when Lieutenant Hyansu made a discovery that would change everything. Deep in the electronic warfare section of the flagship, surrounded by banks of computers and communication equipment, he was analyzing the strange signals coming from destroyed Raptor fighters. Captain Hyansu called over the ship's intercom, his voice tight with excitement. I think I found something important." The alien observers, who had been watching the battle in stunned silence, gathered around Hyansu's workstation. On his screens were patterns of data that looked like brainwaves, pulsing and flowing in complex rhythms. "These are communication signals," Hyansu explained, pointing to the displays. "But they're not like our radio transmissions. They're biological. The Raptor are using some kind of shared consciousness to coordinate their attacks." Observer Kethel leaned closer, his leaf-like skin rustling with curiosity. "A hive mind? That explains how they move with such perfect coordination." "Exactly." Hyansu nodded. "But here's the interesting part. I think we can tap into it." The Altarian officer's tentacles writhed with alarm. "It's impossible. No species has ever successfully interfered with Raptor communications. No other species grew up fighting each other for millions of years." Hyansu replied with a grin. "Humans invented psychological warfare long before we invented spaceflight." What happened next horrified the alien observers. Hyansu and his team began working with captured bionodes from destroyed Raptor fighters. These organic communication devices were still weakly connected to the hive mind, like severed fingers that still twitched with nerve signals. "What are you doing?" the Altarian officer demanded, backing away from the workstation. "Psychological warfare," Hyansu replied calmly, his fingers dancing across his keyboard. "We're going to feed them false information, fear responses, and contradictory orders." The humans connected their computers to the bionodes and began broadcasting directly into the Raptor hive mind. But instead of sending normal communications, they transmitted chaos. They sent signals that made the Raptor think they were under attack from multiple directions. They broadcast fear and confusion, panic and doubt. On the main tactical display, the results were immediate and dramatic. The perfectly coordinated Raptor formations began to break apart. Ships that had been moving in flawless synchronization suddenly started bumping into each other. Fighter swarms scattered in all directions as conflicting orders flooded their shared consciousness. "By the void," whispered the Centauri navigator. They're actually disrupting the hive mind. Meanwhile, Commander So-young was coordinating a different kind of attack. She'd been studying the Varictor formations and noticed something that the alien observers had missed. Within each swarm, there were certain bioships that seemed to be giving orders to the others. "See those larger vessels?" she said, pointing to the tactical display. "They're command ships. Bio-nodes with stronger signals." The bewildered aliens watched as So-young began directing missile strikes against these specific targets. But these weren't ordinary missiles. Human engineers had modified them with electromagnetic pulse warheads designed to disrupt biological electrical systems. In pack hunting, So-young explained as she worked, "You always go for the alpha first. Take out the leader, and the pack falls apart." Same principle applies here. The modified missiles struck the Vrayquator command ships with devastating effect. The electromagnetic pulses didn't just damage the ships, they scrambled the biological networks that controlled them. Command bioships began drifting helplessly, nervous systems overloaded and confused. The alien observers watched in amazement as the mighty Varoctor horde, which had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, began to fall apart. Their perfect coordination was replaced by chaos and confusion. Ships collided with each other, fighters attacked their own forces, and entire formations scattered in panic. "This is impossible," gasped the Altarian officer. "No one fights the Vractor like this." "No one else needed to," replied Hyanshu, still working at his console. "Most species in the galaxy evolved on peaceful worlds. Humans evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill us. We learned to fight dirty because we had to." The tide of battle was turning, and the aliens were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The drop pods fell through Kepler-4 for 2b's atmosphere like burning meteors, their heat shields glowing white-hot as they cut through the poisoned air. Inside the lead pod, Marine Colonel Minho checked his equipment one final time while speaking calmly to his team over the radio. "Remember, we're here to save lives, not count enemy kills," Minho said as the pod shook violently around them. "Every Zephyrian civilian we get out alive is a victory." The alien observers who had volunteered to witness the ground operation were strapped into reinforced seats, their environmental suits pumping pure oxygen into their helmets. They had insisted on coming despite the danger, claiming they needed to document this historic mission. As the pods screamed toward the surface, many of them were probably regretting that decision. The pods hit the ground with bone-jarring impacts, the retro rockets firing at the last second to cushion the landing. As the doors burst open, alien observers got their first real look at what Kepler-4 had become. It was a vision of hell. The once beautiful world now looked like something from a nightmare. The air was thick with toxic spores that glowed with an evil green light. The ground was covered in a black, oily substance that the reactor had secreted as they fed. Strange organic structures grew everywhere, twisted towers of flesh and bone that pulsed with their own heartbeats. "Environmental suits sealed," Minho reported over the radio, his voice steady despite the horror around them. "Proceeding to Evacuation Zone Alpha." The alien observers watched in amazement as the human Marines moved through this toxic wasteland as if it were just another training exercise. Their environmental suits were bulky and heavy, but the humans moved with practiced efficiency. They advanced in coordinated teams, covering each other as they navigated through the poisonous landscape. "Contact front," called out Sergeant Dongmin, raising his weapon. 3 Vractor ground feeders, moving in from the east. The creatures that emerged from behind a twisted organic structure were nightmarish. They looked like giant worms with rows of grinding teeth, each one the size of a small vehicle. Their bodies were covered in acidic slime that ate through anything it touched. The human Marines didn't panic. They spread out, using the terrain to their advantage, and opened fire with weapons specifically designed to deal with organic targets. The Varactor creatures screamed and writhed, but the humans pressed their attack with professional calm. "Bogies down," reported Dongmin, continuing to objective. The alien observers were shocked. They had expected to see the humans overwhelmed by the hostile environment, but instead they were watching these newcomers operate effectively in conditions that would kill most galactic species within minutes. The real test came when they reached the first group of Zephyrian survivors. The plant-like aliens were huddled in the ruins of what had once been a beautiful crystal city. They were dying from exposure to the toxic atmosphere, their chlorophyll-based skin turning brown and brittle. "We've got civilians," called Private Jae-sung over the radio. "They're in bad shape." Without hesitation, Jae-sung lifted a wounded Zephyrian civilian onto his back and began carrying them toward the evacuation zone. The alien was twice his size, but he moved steadily through the poisonous fog while still keeping his weapon ready. Suddenly, more Varactor ground forces appeared. These were different from the feeders, smaller, faster, with razor-sharp claws designed for hunting. They moved in coordinated packs, surrounding the human marines. The alien observers watched in fascination as Jae-sung continued carrying the wounded civilian while firing at the attacking creatures. He moved with fluid grace, using one hand to support his burden, while the other operated his weapon with deadly precision. "How are they still functional?" the Centauri medic asked Dr. Myung, her voice filled with wonder. "The atmospheric readings show toxin levels that should incapacitate any known species." "Adaptation," Myung replied simply, watching the battle through her helmet's display. "Humans evolved to survive in environments that change rapidly and unpredictably. We learn to keep fighting even when everything around us is trying to kill us." The rescue operation continued for hours, with human marines moving through the hellscape like angels of mercy, pulling survivors from the wreckage of their world deep within the largest Raptor bioship, something that had never happened before. In millions of years of galactic conquest was taking place. The Queen Mind, the vast collective consciousness that controlled the entire horde, was experiencing confusion. For countless generations, the Vractor had followed the same pattern. It would arrive at a world, begin feeding, and any species that tried to resist would either be quickly overwhelmed or would flee in terror. The Queen Mind had seen this happen thousands of times across the galaxy. It was as predictable as the movement of stars. But these humans were different. The Queen Mind tried to understand what it was facing. These creatures didn't have the advanced technology of the Centaurians. They weren't as physically powerful as the rock beings from Rigel. Their ships weren't as fast as the Altarian vessels. Yet somehow, they were winning. Captain Wu Jin's squadron had been pursuing a damaged Varactor bioship for 18 hours straight. The enemy vessel was desperately trying to escape, jumping from star system to star system in an attempt to lose its pursuers. The bioship was faster than the human vessels, its organic engines capable of incredible speeds, but the humans just kept coming. "They're trying to shake us again," reported Navigator Yoon-ji, her fingers dancing across her control console as she tracked the bioship's hyperspace signature. Jumping to the Kepler 186 system. "Let them try," Captain Wu Jin responded, his voice calm, despite the exhaustion that should have been setting in after nearly a day of continuous pursuit. "We can do this all day." The alien observers aboard the human ships were amazed. Most species in the galaxy fought in short, decisive battles. When a fight went on for more than a few hours, one side or the other would usually retreat to regroup and resupply. But the humans seemed to have unlimited endurance. "Don't you need to rest?" asked the Centauri observer, her forearms trembling with fatigue just from watching the pursuit. "We're persistence hunters," Wu Jin explained without taking his eyes off the tactical display. "On Earth, humans used to hunt animals by following them for days or even weeks. We didn't need to be faster or stronger. We just needed to never give up." The Queen Mind was beginning to understand the true horror of what it faced. These humans weren't just fighting, they were hunting. They hunted the way ancient predators had hunted on their death world, with patience, intelligence, and an absolute refusal to quit. The bioship they were pursuing was starting to show signs of stress. Its organic systems were overheating from the constant hyperspace jumps. Its bioneural networks were becoming strained from the prolonged flight. The creature was exhausting itself trying to escape, but the humans showed no signs of tiring. "Target is slowing down," reported the tactical officer. "Their hyperspace signature is becoming erratic. They're getting tired," Wu Jin observed with satisfaction. "Maintain pursuit. Don't let them rest." The Queen Mind experienced something it had never felt before in its long existence. fear. Not the simple alarm that came from immediate danger, but a deeper, more primal terror. It was the fear of being hunted by something that would never stop, never tire, never give up. Across the battlefield, other human squadrons were conducting similar pursuits. They worked in coordinated groups, communicating constantly, sharing information about enemy movements and weaknesses. But each human ship captain made their own decisions, adapted to changing situations, and used their individual creativity to solve problems. The hive mind found this terrifying. The queen mind was used to dealing with enemies that thought as a collective like itself. It could predict their moves, counter their strategies, and overwhelm them with superior numbers. But humans were different. They worked together with perfect coordination, yet each one was unpredictable. They followed orders, but also improvised. A discipline, but also creativity. The queen mind couldn't understand how individual minds could work together so effectively while still maintaining their independence. Sir called Navigator Yunji, excitement creeping into her voice. The bioship is dropping out of hyperspace. I think it's exhausted. Captain Wujin smiled grimly. All ships prepare for final assault. Our prey is tired. Time to finish this hunt. The Queen Mind realized with growing horror that it was facing something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that had evolved to be the perfect hunters. The silence that followed the battle was almost as terrifying as the fighting itself. For the first time in galactic history, the mighty Vraktor horde was retreating. The final bioship, its organic hull, scarred and bleeding, limped away into hyperspace with what remained of its scattered swarm following behind. The humans had won. But victory had come at a terrible price. Captain Jinwoo stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the aftermath of the battle. Floating in the void around Kepler 442b were the twisted remains of 37 human ships. Each one represented dozens of crew members who would never see Earth again. The final casualty count was devastating. Over 2,000 human soldiers had given their lives to save a world that wasn't even their own. Sir, reported the communications officer, his voice heavy with exhaustion, we're receiving distress. Signals from 17 of our damaged vessels. Search and rescue teams are already deployed. Jinwoo nodded silently. In the excitement of victory, it was easy to forget that real people had paid the ultimate price. These weren't just numbers on a tactical display. They were friends, colleagues, fellow humans, who had volunteered to risk everything for strangers down on the planet's surface. The rescue operation was still in full swing. Field medic Yuna had set up a makeshift hospital in the ruins of what had once been a beautiful Zephyrian city. She had been working for over 30 hours straight, moving from patient to patient with the kind of focused determination that only came from years of training. The alien observers watched in fascination as Yuna treated human and alien wounded with equal care. She worked on a Zephyrian civilian whose chlorophyll-based skin had been burned by toxic spores, then moved immediately to a human marine who had been injured by Vraktor claws. To her, there was no difference. They were all patients who needed help. The human medic whispered observer Kethel to his companion, she's been working without rest for over a day. How is that possible? Look at her hands, replied the Centauri. Observer, pointing to where Yuna was carefully bandaging a wounded Zephyrian child. They're not shaking. Okay. After all this time, all this stress, she's still completely steady. The most touching moment came when a young Zephyrian child, no more than 6 years old in human terms, approached Captain Jinwoo. The little alien's leaf-like skin was pale from exposure to the toxic atmosphere, but she was alive thanks to the sacrifice of human marines. Why? The child asked in her small musical voice. Why did you come for us? Jinwoo, his uniform torn and bloodied from the battle, knelt down beside the young alien. His face was exhausted, marked by the stress of command and the weight of losing so many of his people. But when he looked at the child, his expression softened. Because that's what people do, he said simply. We help each other, the alien observers, who witnessed this moment, felt something shift in their understanding of the universe. They had seen many species fight over the millennia, They'd witnessed wars for territory, resources, revenge, and conquest. But they had never seen a species fight purely to protect others. They gained nothing from this, the Altarian delegate whispered to his companion. The humans have no claim on this world, no economic interest, no strategic advantage. They risked everything and lost thousands of their own people for strangers. The Centauri observer nodded slowly. And look at them now. They're still working to save every survivor they can find, not even thinking about their own losses. As the rescue operation continued, the alien observers began to understand what they had witnessed.
Oh.
This wasn't just a military victory. It was a demonstration of something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans had revealed themselves to be a species that would fight and die, not for conquest or profit, simply because it was the right thing to do. The galaxy would never be the same. 3 weeks after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the Galactic Council chambers looked completely different. The same representatives sat in the same seats, but the atmosphere had changed. So dramatically that it felt like an entirely different place. Gone was the casual dismissal and barely concealed laughter that had greeted the humans before. Now, every delegate in the chamber watched the holographic displays with respectful silence as footage from the battle played on dozens of screens around the massive room. The recordings were devastating to watch. Human ships diving into impossible odds, Marines fighting through toxic hellscapes, medics working tirelessly to save both human and alien lives. The images showed a species that had redefined what it meant to be brave. The motion before us today, announced the council speaker, his forearms gesturing formally, is to grant full membership status to the species known as humans from the world-designated Earth. The chamber, which had once echoed with laughter at the very mention of humanity, now fell into solemn silence. This wasn't just a procedural vote. It was a recognition of something unprecedented in galactic history. All those in favor of granting full council membership to the human species, please signal now. Every single delegate raised their hand, tentacle, appendage, or whatever they used to signal agreement.
Oh.
The vote was unanimous. Not a single voice was raised in opposition. Ambassador Tejo stood up slowly, still bearing the exhaustion of the past weeks. He had spent countless hours coordinating rescue efforts, attending memorial services for the fallen, and working with alien governments to establish new diplomatic relationships. The weight of responsibility was visible on his face, but so was quiet pride. As soon as the vote was officially recorded, something remarkable happened. Instead of the usual post-meeting rush to the exits, representatives from dozens of species began approaching the human delegation. They weren't coming to offer congratulations on the vote, they were coming with requests. The Rigel Confederation wanted to discuss mutual defense treaties. The Outer Rim colonies were asking about human military advisors. 3 different species requested help with their own Viroctor problems. The requests kept coming one after another until Ambassador Tejo found himself surrounded by alien diplomats. "We would be honored to establish a joint military academy," said the Zephyrian representative, his leaf-like skin still showing the pale coloration of recent trauma. "Our people want to learn from those who saved our world." Altarian delegate, whose tentacles had once writhed with amusement at human pretensions, now approached with obvious respect. "We understand now," he said, extending a tentacle in formal greeting. "Your people aren't just survivors, you're protectors." Jinwoo, who had been invited to attend the session as a military advisor, bore the visible scars of the recent battle. His left arm was in a medical brace, and a healing cut ran across his forehead. But his eyes were clear and determined as he addressed the gathering crowd of alien diplomats. "We prefer to think of ourselves as neighbors," he said with a slight smile. "Good neighbors look out for each other." The simple humanity of that statement seemed to resonate through the chamber. These weren't conquerors or warriors seeking glory. They were people who had risked everything simply because others needed help. Dr. Myung, standing nearby with her research data, found herself answering questions about human psychology and sociology. "We evolved on a world where cooperation meant survival," she explained to a fascinated group of scientists. "We learned that the strong protect the weak, not because they have to, but because that's what makes a civilization worth preserving." As The session continued. It became clear that something fundamental had shifted in galactic politics. The humans weren't just joining the Galactic Council, they were transforming it. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy had found a species willing to fight not for conquest or profit, but for the simple principle that all life had value. The council chambers buzzed with excitement as new alliances formed, and old assumptions crumbled. The galaxy had found its guardians, forged in the crucible of a death world and tempered by the fires of compassion, and in the depths of space. The surviving Vraktor bioships spread the word to others of their kind. Avoid the systems. Protected by the humans? The galaxy's apex predators had finally met their match.